Four sinister and spine-chilling true horror stories uncovered from a haunted spring break. The cabin creaked like an old man's bones, shadows twisting in the corners, yet it held on to something much darker. It was just an escape until they realized it might be a trap. Four friends from Lakeville, Ohio, huddled in a car, excitement mingling with anxiety as they sped towards the decaying relic at Lake Thompson. They were carefree, just kids escaping the shackles of suburban life, or that's what they thought. But minutes into their ride, a collective fear hung thick in the air, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets they weren't meant to hear. "Stay close to the fire, all right?" Jess said with a nervous laugh, oblivious to the shout of a distant crow that sounded eerily like a warning. They tossed their things inside, and the swell of laughter masked the undercurrent of tension simmering just beneath the surface. With twilight stretching its long fingers, the cabin took on a life of its own. It creaked and groaned as though waking from a deep slumber, warning them to leave while they still could. As darkness blanketed the woods, they settled in, flashing smiles that concealed their worries. Sarah shivered when she felt something cold brush against her. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just the wind," Ryan scoffed, rolling his eyes. "We're adults now. Ghost stories are for kids." But even he couldn't shake the unease that settled like lead in his stomach as shadows flickered and danced just beyond their vision. Just past midnight, the storm raged on, rain pounding against the roof, thunder rumbling like a beast in chains. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like a distant echo of forgotten laughter. "Is anyone else hearing this?" Jess asked, anxiety tightening her voice. The others fell silent, tension mulling in the air like storm clouds above. Yet they brushed off her words, their own fears creeping closer as they peered through windows at the darkness swallowing the woods outside. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue." The storm raged on, enveloping them in an uneasy silence. They crowded together, daring each other to delve deeper into the horror stories attached to this cabin. That's when discussion turned into accusation. Old crushes surfaced, jealousy thrummed in the air, and every glance felt heavy with unspoken words. Just as the arguments crescendoed, the lights flickered, then extinguished. They scrambled for flashlights, but when they found their secure beams, one of their own was missing. "Where's Sarah?" Panic set in. Lightning illuminated a photo tacked to the wall, a girl staring back with sunken eyes, her expression fixed in eternal terror. Sarah's face loomed in that image, a ghostly doppelganger in pale comparison. The blood drained from their faces as the whispers intensified, rising into a frenzy that matched their heartbeats. "She can't be gone," Jess cried, desperation dripping from her words as thunder shook the entire cabin. "No one's left this place." With one last scream, a cry swallowed by the deluge outside, the remaining friends stared at one another, realization dawning like the first light of dawn. Their true battle was not against whatever spirit roamed these woods, but against the buried secrets binding them. And suddenly, looking into each other's eyes, they questioned, how far would they go to survive? Would they unravel the truth or fall to the horror that awaited them beyond the shadows? The air felt electric, buzzing with an unspoken terror. Ryan's flashlight beam trembled as he swung it across the chilling corners of the cabin. A hollow silence echoed back, taunting them. "She has to be close," he whispered, as if saying it aloud would summon Sarah back. "Stop! Just stop!" Jess snapped, her voice shaking. "We can't panic. We need a plan." But the dread anchored them, each heartbeat echoing louder than the next. The storm outside raged on, drowning their voices with its deafening roar. The shadows seemed to dance in time with their rising panic, an audience to their fear. "Guys," Jess said, her voice barely breaking through the noise, "remember the stories about the girl who disappeared? That photo on the wall? What if she was—" "Shut up," Ryan cut in, glaring at her. "That's just a story. This is real." But even he felt the cold sweat trickling down his spine. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around them, a chorus of mournful voices crying out in the dark. "We have to go looking for her," Mark said, his face pale. But the idea of stepping outside into the storm felt like stepping into the mouth of a beast. They gathered in a tight huddle, voices overlapping. There was anger and fear, but also desperation. "The light! We need to get to the car!" Jess fretted, her eyes wide, glistening with tears brimming at the edge. Just then, the cabin shook violently, a sound like 1,000 fists on wood. Furniture toppled, sending chairs skidding across the floor, and the oppressive air seemed to thicken, choking them. "What the hell was that?" Mark yelled, as they all stumbled back, hearts racing in unison. A low growl reverberated from somewhere deep within the house, chilling their veins. It's just the wind," Ryan stuttered, but even he didn't believe it. The shadows shifted, darting across the room, mocking their denial. "Sarah!" Jess screamed, voice cracking. "If you can hear us, please come back!" For a moment, the world stood still. The wind howled outside, and the shadowed corners seemed to hold their breath. Then, from the depths of the blackened hallway, a whisper crept through, a voice that was not one of their own. "The truth. It needs to be uncovered." Mark's flashlight flickered ominously, and their breath hitched as they all turned toward the corridor. "Did you hear that?" he stammered, practically shaking. "Time is running out!" the voice cried, piercing through the stillness. It echoed as if from the very walls of the cabin itself. And suddenly, a flicker of movement in the shadows caught their eyes. A figure, pale as moonlight, appeared in the doorway. It was Sarah, or was it? The resemblance choked the breath from their lungs. But her eyes, they were empty, devoid of recognition. "Help me," she mouthed, yet no sound escaped her lips. Panic surged. They could barely breathe. "That's not her! It can't be!" Jess cried, stepping back. The apparition reached, fingers outstretched, drawing nearer. Shadows warped around her like tendrils, dripping with darkness. They could feel the pull, the inevitable force urging them forward. "Run!" Ryan shouted suddenly, breaking their paralysis. They bolted toward the back door, hearts racing, blood pounding in their ears. Each step carried them closer to the unknown. The woods beyond, wild and dark, awaited. But as they reached the door, Jess turned. "What if she needs us?" she yelled over the thundering storm. The ghastly figure stood motionless, waiting. "Don't you dare!" Mark cried, shoving her out the door, as the wind howled in protest. The night swallowed their screams as they fled into the night, but the shadows clung to them, whispering secrets in the wind. They didn't know which was worse, the monster outside or the one inside. Would they escape the cabin, or would it claim another soul? Behind them, the shadows twitched and writhed as a new storm brewed, one of betrayal and buried truths. As they sped into the night, a chilling question hung in the air. How many more were lost in these woods, waiting for their secrets to awaken?
The wind whipped through the trees, clutching at their clothes like desperate fingers. Jess stumbled, her feet slipping in the mud, but Mark grabbed her arm, yanking her back just in time. "Keep moving! We can't stop!" he shouted, his voice barely rising above the howl of the storm. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. They had to reach the car, but the darkness pressed in around them, thicker than the storm. Branches reached out like claws, the shadows of the forest, a terrible curtain meant to hide unspeakable horrors. "Sarah!" Ryan called out, his voice cracking as he cast desperate glances behind. Was she still back there, or had whatever took her already claimed them? "Shh! Did you hear that?"
Jess whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. They halted, the sounds of their feet sinking into the mud fading away, replaced by a low thrum, a rhythmic whisper that brushed against their ears. It echoed the same eerie call that had beckoned them before. "What do you mean?" Mark's voice wavered. He scanned the tree line, flashlight beam flickering with anxiety. The air felt charged, as if simply being present ignited the very fabric of reality around them. Just then, a rustle erupted nearby, the snapping of twigs sounding like gunfire in the oppressive silence. "Go, now!" Ryan shouted, and they took off again, adrenaline pushing their legs forward, even though panic threatened to pull them back. But it was hard to run without knowing if something followed, something hungrier than fear. Suddenly, Jess screamed. The anguish cut through the night like a jagged dagger. Ryan turned, horrified to find her on the ground, grappling with a mass of shadows that twisted around her feet, pulling her slowly into the earth. "Please, help me!" she pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. "No!" Mark lunged forward, but the shadows erupted, thrashing violently as if angered by their intrusion. A long shadow shot past them, a rushing presence revealing itself as a forgotten horror swirling in the dark. It flickered in the edge of Ryan's flashlight. Was that an outline of a face? Teeth glinted, shining with ghostly malice. "Don't look back!" Mark shouted, panic-laden. He tugged at Jess, trying to wrench her free, but she was rooted, lost in the pull of the dark tendrils. The monstrous force dragged her lower, inch by inch, while her screams shrieked through the night like a banshee's wail. The very air seemed to pulsate with their terror, thickening around them. Ryan's flashlight flickered again, casting erratic beams that only deepened their dread. Each moment felt like an eternity, and with each new crest of panic, their chances of escape dwindled. "Help! I can't! Hold on!" Jess cried again, her voice muffled. Something cold gripped Ryan's heart. He recalled the stories from that old photo, the girl they believed to be long gone. But hadn't they come to rescue her? Now they were digging their own graves. "Jess!" Ryan wailed, the sound tearing at his throat, but he felt an invisible thread pulling him away. With shaking hands, he shone his flashlight on her. The darkness seemed to writhe beneath its beam, voices swirling in confusion and anger. "Run, Ryan, please!" she shouted, desperation boiling over. They were losing her, and still the horrors whispered, a taunting chant, forming a tune that hummed in their ears. The truth, it needs to wake. With a final wrenching pull, Jess vanished into the shadows, a scream swallowed by the encroaching blackness. Ryan wavered, torn between the impulse to save her and the primal instinct driving him to preserve his own life.
But the flicker of light revealed one final glimpse of her face, eyes wide with despair. A single thought punctured through the haze of fear. The truth might not be hers to uncover. The storm around them intensified, and Ryan looked at Mark, the betrayal in their eyes reflecting a choice that loomed like a shadow. There was nowhere to run anymore. The cabin was looming in their mind with sharper clarity, calling them back with ghostly hands. They weren't finished yet, but what would they discover if they returned? "Mark, we need to go back." As if in response, the whispers crescendoed, wrapping them like thick fog, sealing their fates. They stepped forward, drawn back toward that cursed cabin, unaware of the grave truths that awaited. The air turned even colder as they approached the cabin, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself was trying to hold them back. Ryan's heart raced, pounding like a drum in his ears. He had to concentrate despite the panic swelling inside him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the choices they had made. "Are we really doing this?" Mark asked, his voice shaking. "We have to," Ryan snapped. The flickering beam of light from the flashlight sliced through the darkness, revealing gnarled wood and rotting beams ahead. They passed through the threshold, the door creaking ominously as they stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like the ghosts of memories long buried. Inside, the cabin felt worse than he had remembered. The walls whispered secrets, an echo of the turmoil that had once lived here. The floor creaked under their weight, groaning with the burden of untold stories. Ryan directed the light towards the mantel, where old photographs lay scattered like discarded dreams. Familiar faces trapped in frame grinned back at him, yet their smiles felt cruel, twisted by unspoken horrors. "Something's off," Mark murmured, scanning the shadowy corners. The oppressive air thickened, closing in on them. The whispers they had heard outside grew clearer, a susurration now rising in an insistent chant, calling to them, promising answers. "They want us to know," Ryan breathed, entranced. He found himself instinctively moving toward the photographs on the mantel. As he leaned closer, one of the pictures caught his eye. A girl with bright eyes and an innocent smile. Her face stirred something deep within him. "Ryan, don't!" Mark's voice broke through, urgency lacing every word. But it was too late. Ryan reached out, fingertips brushing against the frame. An electric shock coursed through him, a blast of fear and familiarity. The whispers escalated, chaos erupting around them. The shadows darkened, swirling faster. The room pulsed with life, thrumming like a wounded beast. "Get away from there!" Mark shouted, his own light flickering wildly as he recoiled. There was a sudden crash, and the cabin seemed to tremble. It felt as if the walls were alive, closing in around them, shaking with rage. With a deafening roar, the photographs flew off the mantel, shattering against the wooden floor. Glass scattered like shattered dreams. Ryan felt something tugging at his shirt, a cold hand gripping his heart. He gasped, looking around frantically. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, eyes wide as panic spread through him. "They're in here! They're all around us!" Mark shouted, his flashlight revealing fleeting shadows dancing along the walls. Ryan turned back towards the door, desperate, but the way they had entered was gone, replaced by a solid wall of darkness and swirling fog that seemed to breathe heavily, blocking their escape. The whispers thickened, repeating the name of a girl, a name that sent chills racing down his spine. "Sarah." Mark began to tremble. What if she's still in here, Ryan? What if we were meant to find her? What if she had been trapped? The realization paralyzed him. What if this was their fate? The ground beneath them shuddered as if to echo Mark's horror. They found themselves drawn deeper into the cabin, each room a mirror reflecting their fear. Memories flooded back, echoes of laughter and joy twisted into something sinister, something that felt like a trap.
Outside, the storm raged like a wild beast, but here, a different kind of storm brewed within the walls, gathering strength, hunger, and something more malevolent. "Ryan, we need to find a way out, now!" Mark urged, breathing hard, panic radiating inside him. But every instinct told Ryan to keep searching. The truth lay somewhere within the heart of the darkness. The truth about Jess, about Sarah, about the night that had thrust them into this nightmare. As despair crept closer, the cabin sighed, the walls vibrating with anticipation. Shadows flickered like flames, forming shapes lurking just beyond their reach. The whispers intensified. The truth, it will awaken. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. There was a sound, like a low growl rumbling from the floor beneath them. Suddenly, from one of the shadows, a figure stepped forward, blurry and indistinct. Ryan's heart slammed against his ribcage. He couldn't tell if this was a trick of the light or something far worse. Who are you?" Ryan stammered, the flashlight's beam trembling in his grasp. The figure didn't answer, but raised a hand pointing toward the basement door at the far end of the room. A cold wind rushed past, as if something long held captive was finally stirring. Ryan turned to Mark, uncertainty flashing between them. "Do we trust it?" Mark whispered, his voice wavering. Before Ryan could answer, the figure receded into the shadows, leaving only its chilling warning echoing in their ears. "Find the truth, or lose yourselves." A suffocating dread wrapped around them as they stood paralyzed, the weight of their choices pressing down. What awaited them in the basement? What truth was buried there? They had come searching for answers, but it felt like they were hurtling towards something far worse. "Ryan, let's go," Mark said, fear wrapping tightly around him. They moved forward toward the basement door, uncertainty clinging to them like the darkness around them. And as Ryan reached for the handle, the weight of 1,000 whispers pushed him forward into the unknown. What lay below could either save them or damn them forever. The basement door creaked as Ryan pulled it open. A rush of cold air escaped, wrapping around him like icy fingers. It smelled of earth and decay, each scent amplifying the dread in his gut. Hera hesitated at the top of the stairs, his breath coming in quick gasps. "Maybe we should reconsider," he started, but Ryan felt the itch of urgency clawing at his insides. "No, we need to go." Sarah. It was a name that hung in the air, heavy with memories and unsaid truths. He stepped into the darkness, the flashlight beam slicing through, revealing rotting wood steps spiraling down into an abyss. The beam flickered, and for a brief moment Ryan thought he saw a shape dart into the shadows, a childlike form with flowing hair. "Did you see that?" he whispered, straining his eyes against the darkness. Mark shivered. "It's just your mind playing tricks. The cabin is messing with us." But his voice wavered, and Ryan could tell Mark felt it too, that sense of being followed. Down they went, the wood groaning beneath their weight. Each step pressed deeper into a memory that they both tried to forget. Ryan felt an unsettling tug at the edge of his consciousness, like tendrils pulling him back, urging him to stop. At the bottom, they entered a small room, walls encased in damp, peeling paint. The only source of light was their flashlight, flickering like the last gasps of a dying star. The air was thick and oppressive, as if time had stopped, trapping the room in a moment of despair. In the center, a small wooden table stood. On it lay artifacts of the past, a cracked porcelain doll, its eyes dark and vacant, an old book, pages yellowed and frayed. Ryan approached the table, compelled by a force he couldn't resist. "Ryan, be careful!" Mark was behind him, voice trembling. "This is wrong. We shouldn't be here." But Ryan flipped the book open, shivering at the sight of scrawled notes in a frantic hand. A name sent chills racing down his spine. Sarah Breyer. Mark's breath hitched. She was the girl who went missing. They said her spirit never left. It felt as if the walls of the cabin were watching them, every rustle echoing their fears. "Ryan, something's not right," Mark urged again, as he stepped closer, irritation and worry mixing in his voice. Just then, the temperature plummeted. A cold draft swept through, snuffing their flashlight. Darkness surged, a suffocating blanket that wrapped around them. "Mark!" Ryan shouted, panic tearing through him. They were engulfed, cut off from each other. A low growl resonated from the shadows, mingling with whispers that turned into shrill shrieks. The room spun, disorienting Ryan until he couldn't distinguish between his own screams and the sounds echoing from the walls. "Ryan!" Mark's voice was close, but so far away. "Help!" He swung his hands through the dark, searching for Mark. The floor trembled, the earth moaning beneath him. Then a flash of light cut through the darkness again. It was brief, but blinding. When his vision cleared, a figure stood before him, a girl with strikingly familiar eyes, her expression both mournful and pleading. "Help me," she whispered, a breath of cold air that froze his heart. Is this Sarah?" Ryan stammered, eyes wide, his body paralyzed by fear. The figure extended a hand, beckoning him closer, but as Ryan took a step, the ground cracked beneath him. "No! Don't!" Mark shouted, just as tendrils of shadow lashed out, wrapping around Ryan's legs, pulling him down. He fought against it, his heart echoing in his ears. "Mark, grab me!" But darkness swirled in chaotic energy, drowning out Mark's frantic calls. The girl's face warped into an expression of pure terror, her mouth moving but no words came out. And just like that, Ryan was yanked into the void, pulled down into a darkness that swallowed him whole. The whispers crescendoed, morphing into a deafening roar as the world around him crumbled. Then silence, the kind that felt alive and charged, coiling around him. Ryan blinked, struggling to understand where he was. "Mark?" he rasped, but no answer came. The walls were bare now, and the room felt different, emptier. And all at once he knew he had lost something crucial, something that felt like himself. As he stared into the void where the girl had stood, a flicker of movement caught his eye at the far end of the room, a door, slightly ajar. His instinct screamed to flee. What's behind that door? He wondered, pulse racing, dread settling deep within him. But as darkness began to close in again, he knew he had to go through. Whatever lay beyond held the last piece of the truth or the ultimate darkness. Would he find a way to save himself and Mark, or become another whisper in the echoes of the cabin? Ryan took a deep breath, steeling himself against the dark weight in the air. The door stood almost invitingly ajar, creaking softly as if it had its own life. Each heartbeat felt like a drum echoing in the quiet, urging him forward. He stepped towards the doorway, the old wood groaning underfoot, each sound amplifying the tension. What lay beyond? An escape or something worse? He peeked inside. The room felt smaller than the last, but despair loomed larger. Dim light slanted in from a cracked window, revealing more eerie remnants, a rusted tricycle, its paint peeling, an overturned rocking chair, abandoned and silent. A chill washed over him. The sense of being unwelcome was oppressive. "Mark?" Ryan called out again, but only silence answered. Anxiety twisted his stomach into knots. Had Mark found a way out, or was he still trapped, floating in the despair of shadows? With a clenched jaw, Ryan moved inside, the floorboards creaking beneath him. The air was heavier here, and he felt a distinct pulse, like a heartbeat, thudding softly within the walls. He picked up the tricycle, dust motes dancing in the thin light. Its handlebars were cold to the touch, sending a shiver up his spine. It felt as if it had been waiting for a child to ride it one last time, but the dim echoes of laughter were long gone. As he skirted the room, unease bubbled in the back of his mind. Something was off. The shadows flickered. He squinted, trying to pinpoint the source, but it was as if the darkness itself was alive. Just then, behind him, a gentle whisper echoed. "Help me." Ryan froze, his breath catching in his throat. He turned sharply. The air grew thick. "Is anyone there?" Panic surged, forcing him to step haltingly backward. "Ryan." The voice was there again, closer, filled with something that set alarm bells ringing in his mind, a pleading tone layered with sorrow. "Mark?" he shouted, feeling desperation claw at his insides. The shadows shifted, coalescing into a form that resembled the girl, but this time it had more substance, as if it were clinging to reality. "What do you want?" "Save us," came the whisper, but it felt laden with desperation. "We must save us before—" The voice faded, but the urgency remained, and a fluttering series of shapes flitted through his periphery. He turned, panic mounting, but there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the room. Sweat trickled down his back, each droplet heavy with dread. "What's happening here?" He searched for an answer, but the only response was a low rumble from deep within the walls, as if the very cabin was awakening, shifting with discontent. Suddenly, the floor began to tremble beneath him. "Hold on!" Ryan stumbled, grabbing the tricycle for balance. A soft thud sounded, and he glanced around. The rocking chair had started to sway, moving of its own accord in a grotesque mockery of life. A jolt of electricity shot through him, illuminating the room with fleeting sparks of fear. Just as he steadied himself, a loud crash erupted from behind him. The door slammed shut. "Ryan!" Mark's voice echoed outside, filled with panic. "Get out of there, now!" Panic surged through him as Ryan raced to the door, reaching for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows were closing in, flickering like the last breath of a dying candle. The whispers grew louder, twisting into a sickening harmony. "Save us before the darkness takes you too," they chorused. Ryan's pulse hammered in his ears as he pounded on the door, feeling the weight of the darkness bearing down on him. "Mark, help! I can't get out!" But the ground shook violently, swallowing his pleas with its roar. He felt the air growing thicker. In the flickering light, shadows distorted and twisted, swirling around him, eager to consume. Desperation clawed at his throat. "What do you want?" Ryan shouted, anger boiling over. But instead of answering, the whispers escalated, pleading, promising, demanding. And then the girl appeared, no longer a shadow, but solid, eyes wide with terror, face twisted in anguish. "You're too late," she mouthed silently, reaching out, desperate and broken. Ryan's heart raced. He couldn't let this be the end. But as the world around him collapsed, he knew he had to make a choice. Cling to the girl and the shadows, or break free into the light. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he tore himself away from the seductive grasp of darkness and lunged for the exit. Would he make it? Would he save Mark in time? Or would they both be consumed? The door groaned, almost mocking him. "No! No! No!" Panic twisted in his chest as he yanked harder, just as the shadows lunged. Would he escape before the voices swallowed him? Or would he face the ultimate darkness, forever lost in a cabin of whispers? The darkness seemed to breathe, and Ryan felt as if it were drawing closer, wrapping him in its suffocating embrace. Suddenly, with a final desperate lunge, the door flung open. He burst forward, the light slashing through the shadows, burning with an intensity that stole the breath from his lungs. He stumbled into the hallway, collecting himself as he pressed against the walls, gasping for air.
but panic clawed at him, squeezing his throat. "Mark!" he shouted again, his voice shaking. Was there any response? Silence swallowed his call, stretching the seconds into an unbearable tension. The cabin creaked ominously, like it had taken a breath of its own. With dread flooding his veins, Ryan took cautious steps back down the corridor, his heart pounding harder with each movement. The floors groaned beneath him, a chorus of wood and whispering shadows. He glanced back once at the door, half expecting it to close again, trapping him in that oppressive room forever. But it stayed open, revealing the chaos within. A disturbance caught his attention, a flicker of movement at the end of the hall. "Mark?" He pressed forward, dread propelling him, dread that felt alive. Each footfall echoed, bouncing off the walls and amplifying his growing fear. Then he saw it, a flicker of white against the consuming shadows. A ghostly figure, barely a child, with wide eyes and a tangle of hair. It faded in and out of view, a temporal wraith twisted in agony. "Help!" it mouthed, words lost in the straining air. "Mark!" Ryan willed himself to take another step, hope and fear coiling together. "Is that you?" The ghost turned, pointing down the hall with a trembling finger. In that moment of hesitation, Ryan felt a chill. It wasn't just the air, it was something deeper. The girl's face was one of both anguish and longing. She vanished down the corridor in a flurry of shadows.
Something in Ryan's gut screamed at him to run, to turn away and not give in to the madness of the place. But he moved, driven by the hope of finding Mark, or perhaps, worse yet, knowing what fate awaited them both. As he approached the end of the hallway, the walls began to shift with an energy of their own. A low growl rumbled beneath his feet, threatening to swallow him whole. Ryan reached the doorway, a room that felt no less oppressive than the last, but held a different weight. An open door that felt like a portal to his worst fears. "Mark!" Panicking, he stepped inside, scanning the shadowy corners. Dust swirled in the lonely light, dancing as if heralding his despair. In the far corner lay a figure, unmoving. "Ryan," it was Mark's voice, weak like it was fed through a broken speaker. "Help! I can't." Ryan rushed to his friend, the shadows in the room deepening as if they had senses of their own. "Mark, what happened? Are you hurt?" Mark's eyes opened slowly, confusion mingling with terror. The look in his eyes told Ryan all he needed to know. The shadows were claiming him, pulling him into their depths. "The girl, she was here. She wanted me to come." Before Ryan knew it, the girl appeared again, face distorted with despair, the echo of the looming darkness drumming against his eardrums. "You have to help us before it's too late," she insisted, her voice piercing like a shard of ice. "Get away from him!" Ryan shouted, stepping forward to shield Mark. But the girl didn't fade. Instead, she lunged closer, her hollow, pleading eyes fixed on him, straining against some unseen force. The dread spiraled into a frenzied panic as the walls around them vibrated ominously. The window shattered, scattering glass like deadly confetti, and the shadows surged towards Mark. "Ryan, don't let them take me!" Ryan's heart raced, an overwhelming urge to save his friend, battling with an instinctual drive to flee. He glanced back and saw the door he had just entered beginning to meld with the darkness. Fear flooded his chest. A terrible choice loomed before him. Could he save Mark and risk being trapped in this waking nightmare? Or would he flee, abandoning his friend to the shadows? Time stretched, and the darkness pressed in, hungry and relentless. "What do I do?" he shouted, as the shadows reached for Mark, claw-like grips shimmering in their touches. And then it hit him. He had to confront what lingered in that cursed place. The girls and the shadows were tied to something horrifying, something muddied in the past.
"Mark, hold on, just a little longer and I'll figure this out." But as he stepped further into the room, feeling the darkness wash over him, he knew the clock was ticking. Would he unearth the truth in time, or would he too be consumed by the ensnaring grip of the shadows, forever lost like the souls before him? The shadows clawed at Ryan, wrapping around his ankles like frozen fingers. He stood on the precipice of a decision that could either seal his fate or save them both. He forced himself closer to Mark, who was now on his knees, eyes wide, reflecting a dark abyss of fear that seemed to pull Ryan in. "Ryan, please, I can feel them," Mark gasped, his breath hitching as the shadows began to creep over his skin. They slithered like serpents, consuming the light around him. "You have to do something." The girl, her eyes now glaring with desperation, stepped closer. "You can't run. You must know the story, the reason, before it takes him." "Stop!" Ryan shouted, panic spilling in his voice. "What story? Tell me what it is. I can't lose him." The girl hesitated, as if the air shifted between them. "Please, it will set us free," she whispered, vulnerability flickering in her gaze. Ryan's mind raced. He had to understand what this darkness craved, but first he needed to break through the terror clouding his thoughts. "What happened to you?" he demanded, tears in his eyes. Mark's voice broke through the suffocating whisper of shadows. "Stop talking to her! She's part of it!" He clawed at the floor, fighting against the invisibility that threatened to suck him down. "Ryan, help me!" "Tell me!" Ryan pressed his hands against his ears, drowning out the chaos swirling in the room. "I'll do anything." The girl's face twisted in pain as shadows caressed her cheeks. "They were here once. I was trying to help them, but they dragged us under. My name is Anna," she stammered, her voice echoing softly as if it belonged to a faraway place. "We were lost. We wanted to leave, but we couldn't." Another low growl resonated through the room, shaking the walls. A viscous darkness pulsed, quickening in rhythm. The sound permeated Ryan's bones, a cold fingers of dread inching up his spine. "Let them go!" Ryan screamed, his feet taking him closer to the dark figure looming just beyond the doorway. Desperation replaced doubt, the instinct to fight against the inevitable overwhelming him. He grabbed Mark's arm, clenching it tightly. "Hold on, Mark. I won't let them have you." But as Ryan's grip tightened, he felt something shift beneath him. The cabin responded, almost alive, as the very walls began to pulse like a living thing, breathing in and out, feeding off their fear. "Make them remember!" Anna shouted, her voice piercing through the tangible fog of dread. "They've forgotten who they were. Remember, the children!" Ryan's mind raced again. The children. Stories from the cabin's past, tales of disappearances, unsolved mysteries that haunted the town like the shadows stalking him now. Were they the lost children? "No!" Mark shouted, eyes wide as more shadows crawled up his body, leaving trails of despair. "Don't listen! We can't!" "No!" Ryan interrupted, digging his nails into his skin to stop himself from buckling under the weight of darkness. "I need to dig into this past. If I don't confront it, we're done." The walls began to close in, another growl echoing as if in agreement. Ryan felt each heartbeat like a drum, resonating with the truth that had been kept at bay. Inside his mind, the fragments of stories clicked together, a history as gruesome as it was tragic. "Children lost to this very darkness, forgotten!" he shouted, feeling a surge of fury. "I will not be another soul to slip away." With unexpected resolve, Ryan pulled Mark closer, ready to rip the chains of the past apart. "We will break this!" he yelled, feeling the power push back against him. And then, in the midst of the chaos, he saw it. A shimmer of light in the depths of the shadows that spoke louder than words.
It beckoned promisingly, but warned of the peril that lay in answering its call. "Help us! Help us remember!" Anna whispered, her figure wavering between reality and despair. Ryan's pulse quickened. He felt the weight of the choice bearing down on him like an anvil. Could he awaken the memories of those lost, or would he too fall into eternal darkness, forever tied to the very shadows that invaded his life? "No," he declared, taking a step into the void. But as he approached the shimmering light, a chilling scream erupted from the depths of the shadows, a sound woven with the agony of despair and terror, freezing him to the core. What had he unleashed? And would they ever escape this relentless nightmare? The scream echoed, a piercing wail that clawed at Ryan's mind. It resonated within the walls, vibrating in tandem with the shadows that constricted around them. Time stretched and twisted, every second pulsating like a heartbeat in a silent, suffocating world. "Ryan, run!" Mark's voice strained, teetering on the edge of hysteria. The shadows writhed over him, their grip tightening like a noose. But where could he run? The memory of the children, the whispers of torment and helplessness flooded him. Turning to Anna, Ryan shouted, "Just tell me how! What do we have to remember?" "It's the stories! The stories bind us, and they bind the darkness!" Anna implored, her eyes flickering like candle flames swaying in the wind. "You have to make them speak!" The dark figure loomed larger, thick tendrils of shadow reaching out hungrily. Ryan felt icy fingers wrap around his waist, tugging him back toward the abyss of despair. The cabin creaked ominously, its walls seeming to pulse with every agonized breath. "No! No! No!" Mark shouted through gritted teeth, struggling against the shadows. But before he could react, a sharp, echoing sound cut through the air. A distant laughter. It was childlike, innocent, yet steeped in malice. Ryan's heart raced as the walls warped, revealing flickers of darkened memories, ghostly images of children playing, their joy mingled with horror that twisted their smiles into grimaces. "They were here once," Anna urged, locking gazes with Ryan.
The darkness took them. They are the key. "How?" he pressed, panic squeezing his throat. A shadow knotted around his ankle, chilling him to the bone. The shadows whispered now, a cacophony of lost voices, their pleas intertwining in a sinister melody. "Help us! Help us!" With a surge of determination, Ryan shouted over the growing noise. What stories? What did they want? In the flickering light that danced through the cabin, Ryan glimpsed the souls trapped in the darkness, the eternally lost children, their faces twisted between anguish and longing. Their mouths gaped, soundlessly crying out for help, while shadows constricted like a serpent tightening its grip. Mark thrashed at his bonds, eyes wild with fear. "Ryan, we're running out of time! They'll take you too!" But Ryan felt himself being drawn into the memories, heart racing with urgency. "I can't leave you," he shouted back, his whole body trembling. "I need to know. We have to remember." Anna urged him closer, her voice barely a whisper now. "It's your fear. They're feeding from it. You have to face it, like they couldn't." Suddenly, the shadows around Mark shrieked, a bone-chilling sound that reverberated through Ryan's very soul. Mark fell back, struggling to push the darkness away, fingers clawing at the floor, but the shadows shifted, hungry for his despair. "No!" Ryan screamed, breaking free from the numbness wrapping around him. He turned, eyes wide, focus narrowing on the shimmering light. "Remember the stories," Anna forced out, her eyes glimmering with hope. "Look beyond the darkness." Ryan took a breath, a flash of warmth amid the cold penetrating his spirit. I won't let you take him, he vowed, feeling adrenaline coursing through him. He closed his eyes and unleashed the fragments of forgotten tales, the laughter and sorrow, the triumphs and losses. At first, silence fell. Then the air shifted. The walls creaked, shifting. The shadows writhed angrily, hissing as if recoiling from the memories he summoned. Then suddenly he became aware of them, just beyond the threshold of his consciousness, faces emerging from the darkness, their eyes vacant yet pleading. Each face bore a story, a gripping horror entwined with innocence lost. "What's happening?" Mark gasped, fear rising in his voice. "I'm remembering," Ryan shouted, the shadows intensifying in fury, thrashing against the walls. Then a chilling voice bellowed from the darkness, a guttural growl that tore through the air. "You should not have awakened them." Ryan opened his eyes, feeling a surge of power from the memories of those lost. The air crackled, thick with energy and terror. And in that moment, as light clashed against darkness, Ryan realized the reckoning was just beginning. He looked back at Mark, who clung desperately to hope. Together! But just before their hands could meet, the shadows lunged forward, and the shriek of lost voices filled the air. Would the memories save them?
Or would they unleash something worse? The resolution was far from clear as darkness enveloped the cabin once more. As the shadows collided violently with the memories Ryan summoned, everything erupted into chaos. It felt like a storm inside a tornado, the very essence of the cabin reaching out, storming against the encroaching darkness that screamed for their despair. "Don't lose it! We need to stick together!" Mark shouted, but the furious darkness roared back, drowning out his voice, warping it into something unrecognizable. Ryan closed his eyes again. He didn't have much time. He could feel the weight of countless desperate souls pressing against him. He needed to break free from this nightmare. "Listen to me!" Ryan yelled out into the charge of emotions swirling around him, the shadows trembling in response. "I can feel your pain. I know you're here, trapped, but your stories can't end like this. Not again!" Suddenly, the horror quieted. It was as if his words had struck a chord, reverberating throughout the cabin. Faces emerged from the shadows, children, lost and pleading, their forms flickering like dying embers. In their eyes shone agony, but also a spark of hope. Anna must have known, Ryan thought, desperation fueling him. These are the lost children, the ones who never made it out. They linger here, waiting for their truths to be heard. Energy buzzed in the air, the shadows losing form, shimmering and struggling against the light of memories, laughter mingling with cries that transcended time. The darkness hesitated, caught in the conflict between sustenance and salvation. Mark grasped Ryan's arm, his grip both a lifeline and a life belt. Together they faced the swirling mess of shadows and ethereal faces. "Tell us your stories! We can set you free!" Ryan shouted, the words tumbling from his heart, desperation clinging to every syllable. The air crackled with tension. Then suddenly, a sphere of light ignited in the center of the room, illuminating the figures trapped within. The children erupted into a chorus of whispers, their stories flooding out in a rush, a testament, a union that demanded to be heard. "We wanted to play. We wanted to go home," they cried, their voices rising above the shadows. "But they took us and left us here, trapped forever." The cabin shuddered violently, resisting the flickering light that threatened to weaken its hold. The shadows screamed in fury, lashing out, but they were losing their power with each word spoken. With a deep breath, Ryan leaned into the light. "You are not forgotten," he shouted with fierce conviction, grounding himself in the moment.
Let their stories break these chains. Let them know your truth. The shadows lunged, swirling down low with tempestuous ferocity. But as each child spoke their truth, it resonated like a war cry, cracking the stronghold of dread that had entwined the cabin. "Remember us," they echoed, their united voices shifting the tide.
Mark fought back against the shadows clawing for him, pushing through the pull. "Ryan, it's working!" And in that moment, the shift was palpable. The shadows recoiled as the light overtook them, swirling and twirling into a cyclone of memories, pleas and laughter, entwined with love and loss. "Help us remember," the children urged, their voices wrapping around Ryan like a warm blanket, pushing against the dark corners. Then it struck him, the final fragment, the one memory that could bring it all together. "I remember that summer, the games we played by the lake, the dreams we had," he shouted, his energy surging. And just like that, the last barriers fell. The recollections poured forth, creating a dazzling mosaic of joy, laughter, and tears, reshaping the cabin's narrative. The weight of countless lost hopes pushed against the shackles of the unseen force, igniting a freedom that illuminated the room. The shadows shrieked, unable to bear the onslaught of truth and light. The cries of despair morphed into jubilant cheers as the light enveloped everything. Caught up in the blast of purity, Ryan felt the grip on Mark release. "We're breaking free!" he yelled, exhilaration flooding his spirit. Then came a final burst, a shattering explosion that burst the shadows apart, leaving only familiarity in its wake. In its place, he and Mark stood bathed in powerful brilliance, the truth weaving itself back into the fabric of the cabin, cleansing the pain. "Together!" Ryan shouted again, grasping Mark's hand as they turned to face the vibrant light. As the shadows dissipated and memories flowed freely, they heard the children's laughter echoed distinctly now, surrounding them, propelling them forward. And then came a whisper, a sweet, gentle sound that resonated in their hearts, bidding them farewell. "Thank you for remembering. We are free at last." With that, the cabin shivered, the darkness finally retreating, and the world around them brightened. They stumbled forward, somehow propelled by a force they couldn't grasp. Together they stepped outside, into the wild where the moonlight spilled across the lake. The storm that raged had quieted. The breath of freedom washed over them, the chill of the woods now soothing rather than suffocating. And as they turned back to the cabin, they felt lighter, unburdened. The air was clearer, not only of the remnants of suffocation, but also of hope, a new beginning. "Let's go home," Mark said, squeezing Ryan's shoulder. As they walked, a sliver of light emanated from the cabin, an echoing reminder that even the darkest secrets can be illuminated, leaving a trail of hope behind. The whispers of the past faded into the cool night air, signs of a tragic yet beautiful end that evolved into a hopeful future. Ryan took a deep breath and sighed. A weight lifted. Sometimes all it takes is one voice to shatter the dark, but now it was their turn to lead others out. You need to subscribe now to this channel so you don't miss more exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support and smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this ending. What did you think? We want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the word.